I was 70 when I received a letter that shouldn't have existed. Not an email, not a postcard from some vacationing relative, but a real letter, paper, envelope, handwritten. At my age, surprises usually come in the form of unexpected diagnoses or a call from the pharmacy. But this was something else. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting in my kitchen, sipping weak coffee and listening to the refrigerator hum like a tired old man trying to stay relevant. The envelope lay on the table, plain and beige, like any other piece of mail. But my name, Mr. Harold Vincent, was written in a hand I hadn't seen in 40 years. I recognized it immediately. Sharp, elegant, but slightly shaky now. Nina's hand. I stared at it for what felt like forever. Nina. My first love. The woman I should have married. The one I let slip through my fingers because I was too young, too stubborn, and too sure I'd have all the time in the world to fix things. She'd moved to Oregon back in '82, married a dentist, and never answered my letters. And then she disappeared from my life entirely, or so I thought. I opened the envelope carefully, like it might crumble in my fingers. The paper inside smelled faintly of lavender. Her scent. My hands trembled slightly as I unfolded it. Harold, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Not to Oregon, not to some quiet lakeside retreat, but gone. I didn't write before because you wouldn't have believed me. But now you have to. This concerns you. And your son. I read that last line again. And again. Your son. I've never had a son. I've lived a quiet, mostly solitary life. Married once, briefly. No kids. No regrets, or so I told myself. But Nina wouldn't lie. Not like this. The rest of the letter was short. She wrote that he didn't know about me, that he had grown up thinking someone else was his father. She didn't name him. Didn't give an address. Just said this. You'll find what you need in the safety deposit box I left in Portland. The key is enclosed. Sure enough, taped to the inside of the envelope was a small brass key, worn and cold. That's when the air in the room changed. The past, which I had buried under decades of routine and silence, kicked down the door and pulled up a chair. And I knew one thing, I had to go to Portland. Even if it broke me. The bus ride to Portland was long and uneventful. Gray fields rolled by outside the window, stitched together by tired highways and skeletal trees. I sat near the back, clutching a small duffel bag and Nina's letter, folded so many times it was starting to tear at the creases. I hadn't traveled in years. My knees didn't like walking, my back didn't like sitting, and my patience for strangers had worn thin over the last few decades. But something in that letter lit a fire in my bones. A son. My son. I had questions. Too many. Why now? Why tell me only after she was gone? Who raised him? What kind of man did he become? And why keep me out of it? By the time I reached Portland, dusk had draped itself over the city like an old coat. I checked into a cheap motel off Burnside, the kind with buzzing fluorescent lights and water stains on the ceiling. I didn't care. All I needed was a bed and a working bathroom. The next morning, I made my way to the bank. It was a modern glass structure nestled between coffee shops and yoga studios. I felt like an antique walking through its sliding doors. The receptionist gave me a practiced smile as I handed over the key and Nina's death certificate, which had arrived separately by mail a week earlier. Legal details. A formality. The safety deposit box was smaller than I'd imagined. Inside were only 3 things, a photograph, a sealed envelope, and a small wooden carving of a bird. The photo was old, faded around the edges. In it stood a young man in his 20s, dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that reminded me uncomfortably of my own. Next to him, hand on his shoulder, was Nina. A little older, a little wearier than I remembered, but unmistakably her. They stood in front of a red brick building I didn't recognize. I stared at the young man. My son. The envelope was addressed simply, for Harold. When you're ready. I didn't open it. Not yet. My hands were shaking. Instead, I held the carving. It was a simple bird, maybe a sparrow, shaped with care and sanded smooth. I remembered Nina's father used to carve things like this. Had he passed the skill down? That night, back at the motel, I placed the items on the small desk and just stared at them. The photo. The envelope. The bird. 3 puzzle pieces from a life I never knew I had. At some point, I opened the bedside drawer looking for the motel Bible. Instead, I found a used paperback someone had left behind, East of Eden. I smiled. Nina's favorite book. Coincidence? Or a sign? The envelope sat on the desk for 2 days before I opened it. I couldn't bring myself to do it right away. Something about the weight of that letter, not just the paper, but what it might say, kept my fingers frozen. It was like holding a grenade and not knowing if the pin was still in. But on the 3rd morning, I woke before dawn, the kind of sleep where you don't dream but wake up tired anyway. I made myself a bad cup of motel coffee, sat by the window, and slit the envelope open with my pocketknife. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, just like the first one. Neat, deliberate. Nina's voice again, steady even as it spoke across time. Harold, it began. His name is Matthew. He's 38. You met him once. You didn't know it, but you did. I stopped reading. Matthew. The name alone hit me like a whisper from a locked room. I went back to the letter. He works with wood. Teaches art at a community college in Eugene. Never married. No kids. He thinks his father was a traveling carpenter I met in California. That's the story I gave him. I read that part 3 times. He looks like you, more than he knows. He has your temper, your laugh. And he walks the same way, fast, like the world might outrun him. I used to watch him from the window and think, Harold would have yelled at him to slow down. That made me laugh. A strange, aching laugh. Nina continued. I didn't tell him the truth because I didn't want to confuse him. Or maybe I didn't want to open old wounds. Maybe I didn't want to admit I still thought of you, all these years later. I swallowed hard. There was an address. A number. A photo clipped to the bottom of the page. It showed Matthew at a workshop bench, holding a chisel, surrounded by curls of wood and shavings. His hair was messy, his hands strong. He looked focused. Alive. I traced the image with my fingers. My son. Later that day, I stood outside the community college in Eugene. The campus was modest, red brick buildings, wide sidewalks, students walking by with earbuds and backpacks. A girl bumped into me and muttered an apology without slowing down. I found the art building. Room 117. According to the schedule, Introduction to Wood Sculpture was in session. I stood outside the door, hand on the knob. My heart pounded like I was 20 again. What would I say? Hi, I might be your father, wasn't the kind of icebreaker you just throw around. I let go of the handle. Walked away. Coward. But as I turned the corner, I saw him, Matthew, through the window. Standing at the front of the room, showing a student how to angle a chisel. Focused. Patient. Hand steady. Back straight. He looked like someone I would have wanted to be. I didn't go back to the college the next day. Instead, I wandered around Eugene like a man who'd taken a wrong turn in his own life. I sat on benches, drank burnt coffee from corner cafes, and watched strangers pass me by, young people, loud, full of plans and complaints. I felt like a ghost no one could see. A relic with unfinished business. The motel was starting to smell like damp socks and old regrets, so I found a little diner downtown. Red booths, checkered floors, a waitress named Connie who called everyone Han. I ordered pancakes just to have something warm in front of me. Halfway through breakfast, I noticed a familiar figure walk past the window. Matthew. He didn't see me. He was with a woman, about his age, short dark hair, confident stride. They laughed at something, walked past the window, and disappeared around the corner. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth. Was that his partner? A friend? Someone more? Suddenly, something ridiculous occurred to me. I stood up, left a 20 on the table, and followed them. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just knew I couldn't let the moment slip again. They had stopped 2 blocks away at a small bookstore cafe. I waited across the street, heart pounding. Eventually, Matthew came out alone, talking on the phone, pacing back and forth. Then he stepped inside again. It took me 20 minutes to work up the courage. I crossed the street. Entered the cafe. There were maybe 10 tables, most full. I spotted him in the corner, now sitting alone with a book and a cup of tea. My legs moved before my brain could stop them. Is this seat taken? I asked. He looked up, surprised. Then smiled politely. No, go ahead. I sat down, heart racing. I didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to be near him. Hear his voice. Pretend, for a moment, that I belonged. He returned to his book. I sipped my coffee. We sat in silence for several minutes, 2 strangers who weren't really strangers. Then he said, without looking up, you know, you remind me of someone. I smiled, but it came out sad. I get that a lot. He looked at me fully now. Do you live around here? No, I said. Just visiting. Well, enjoy Eugene, he said, nodding kindly. It's a good town. He went back to his reading. I wanted to stay. I wanted to scream, I'm your father. But instead, I stood up. Thanks for the company, I said. Sure thing, he replied, already halfway lost in the pages. Outside, the wind cut sharp across my face. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I had finally sat across from my son. And he hadn't known. I stayed in Eugene longer than I planned. I told myself I was just soaking in the town, stretching my legs, enjoying the quiet pace. But the truth was, I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every morning I walked the same route, past the art building, through the park, to a little bakery that smelled like butter and patience. I'd sit at the window with a cup of coffee and watch people live their lives. Sometimes I saw Matthew in the distance. Never too close. Never again at the same table. I didn't have a plan. Not really. Just proximity. I wasn't ready to tell him. Not yet. Then one morning, a woman sat down at my table without asking. She had a small terrier on a leash and the kind of no-nonsense attitude I remembered from women in my younger days. You've been watching that college for a week now, she said, sipping her coffee. You look like a man trying to jump in but forgetting how to swim. I blinked. Excuse me. I live across the street, she said, motioning with her chin toward a row of old apartments. I've seen you. Always walking. Always stopping. Always leaving. I didn't know what to say. Her dog sneezed. I'm not a stalker, I said. She laughed. Didn't say you were. But you've got that look. Like you're circling something big. Something that matters. I hesitated, then nodded. Something like that. She held out her hand. Name's Carol. You. Harold. We shook. She didn't ask questions, not right away. Just sat there with her coffee and her dog and let the silence stretch comfortably between us. After a while, she said, You want to talk about it, I'm here. You don't, that's fine too. But life's funny, Harold. Sometimes it hands you a second chance. Just once. You don't always get a third. Then she stood, whistled to her dog, and walked away. I sat there a long time after she left. That night, I dreamed I was standing in a hallway full of doors. Behind each one was a life I never lived. One of them was open. Light poured out. And in that light stood Matthew, holding the bird carving. The next morning, I walked without thinking. My feet knew where to go before my mind caught up. The park, the sidewalk, the college, it was all muscle memory now. I passed the art building, like always. But this time, I didn't stop. I turned the corner, crossed the street, and found myself in front of the apartments Carol had pointed to the day before. Her unit was on the ground floor. A hanging planter full of half-dead petunias marked her window. I knocked. She opened the door with a toothbrush in her mouth and a look that said, "Really? Got coffee?" I asked. She pointed behind her without a word, then vanished into the bathroom. 5 minutes later, we were on her patio. 2 chipped mugs, her dog gnawing a chew toy, the sun struggling through the morning clouds. "You ever regret not doing something?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. Just sipped. "Every day," she said at last. I nodded. We sat in silence. Then I told her. Not everything, but enough. About Nina. The letter. The box. The bird. The man at the cafe who didn't know he was my son. Carol didn't gasp. Didn't offer clichés. Just listened, like she'd been doing it all her life. When I finished, she said, "You carry it like a backpack. And it's getting heavier." I smiled. "You some kind of therapist?" "No," she said. "Just a woman who's lived long enough to know what grief looks like when it's wearing a nice shirt." That made me laugh. She leaned forward. "Tell him, Harold. Before the silence gets too loud to break." I looked at her. Her face was lined, but kind. Steady. "I don't even know how," I admitted. She shrugged. "Write him a letter. Give it to him. Walk away if you have to. But give him something. Because right now, he has nothing, not even a reason to ask questions." That night, I sat on the motel bed with a pen and a pad of paper. And I began. "Dear Matthew." It took me 3 drafts to write the letter. The first one was too formal. Like a stranger writing a business apology. The second tried too hard, full of poetic flourishes and metaphors I had no business using. Nina used to tease me about that. "You're not Hemingway," she'd say, "but I love you for trying." The third one was simple. Honest. It just said what I needed to say. That I had known his mother, and loved her. That I didn't know about him until recently. That I didn't expect anything, not forgiveness, not understanding, not even a response. Just that I wanted him to have the truth. And that, if he ever wanted to talk, he knew where to find me. I signed it simply, Harold. I placed the letter in a plain envelope, sealed it, and tucked the photo and bird carving inside. Then I walked to the college. Matthew's office door was open. He wasn't there. A stack of papers sat on his desk, a mug half full of cold coffee beside it. I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Then I stepped in, set the envelope on top of the papers, and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night. Kept imagining scenarios, good, bad, humiliating. Would he read it? Would he throw it away? Would he laugh? Would he be angry? Would he show it to someone else? In the morning, I packed my things. It was time to leave Eugene. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe back home. Maybe not. At checkout, Connie from the diner saw me crossing the street and waved. I waved back. Carol's door was closed. I slipped a note under it, "Thank you for listening." Then I got on the bus. Somewhere between Eugene and the edge of Oregon, I closed my eyes and whispered, "At least I told him." Because sometimes, that's all you get. 2 days after I returned home, the letter arrived. It was in my mailbox, sandwiched between a grocery store flyer and a medical bill I didn't want to open. No name on the envelope, just my address, written in a hand that was strong, deliberate. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Harold," it began. I don't know what to say. My hand started shaking. I sat down on the porch steps to read. "I've read your letter 10 times. Maybe more. At first, I thought it was a joke. Some weird mistake. But then I looked at the photo. And I remembered you." I blinked. "Remembered? We met once. I was 12. My mom introduced you as a friend from her past. We went to the park. You bought me a soda. We talked about birds." My throat tightened. She never told me the truth. But looking back, there were signs. The way she talked about you. The box she kept with your letters. I found them after she died. I gripped the paper tighter. I don't know what I feel right now. Angry? Confused? Curious? All of it, maybe. I don't know what to do next. But I didn't want to leave you waiting. I swallowed hard. Thank you for telling me. I don't know if I'm ready for more yet. But if I ever am, I'll write again. There was no signature. Just a line at the bottom. P.S. The bird is beautiful. I keep it on my desk. I folded the letter slowly and stared out across the yard. A robin landed on the fence. Tilted its head. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled without sadness. Weeks turned into a month. Matthew didn't write again. Not properly. But he didn't disappear either. One Sunday, a postcard arrived. No return address. On the front, a photo of a wooden hawk in mid-flight, wings stretched wide, talons extended, fierce and beautiful. On the back, 2 words in neat, slanted handwriting. Still carving. I stared at it for a long time. Then I placed it on the mantel above the fireplace, right next to a faded photo of Nina from the early 70s. She was smiling with that half-smirk of hers, arms folded like she was about to win an argument. I imagined her seeing that postcard and saying, "Told you he was yours." The next Sunday, a package. Inside, an old, worn copy of Birds of the Pacific Northwest. On the inside cover, written in careful pen. I remember this one. Page 48. The Stellars J. Page 48 showed a black and blue bird with a wild crest and intelligent eyes. I hadn't seen one in years, but I remembered pointing it out in that park when Matthew was a boy. He'd been so curious. So full of questions. And I'd been just a visitor. So it went. Not letters. Not calls. But gestures. Like messages in bottles, floating between 2 shores. Every Sunday, something new. A pressed leaf between 2 index cards. A sketch of a workbench, with tiny notes scribbled in the margins. A paper crane made from a map of Oregon. I sent things too. A black and white photo of me and Nina at a street fair in 1969, she's holding a balloon, I'm holding her hand. A page torn from an old recipe book, her lemon bread. A tiny compass she once carried in her purse, just in case we got lost, she used to say. No explanations. No pressure. Just offerings. Little bridges made of memory. Then, one morning, not a Sunday, I opened my mailbox and found a folded piece of plain paper. No envelope. Just a single note, scrawled in familiar ink. Dear Harold. There's a coffee shop in Eugene I like. Tuesdays, around 10 a.m. I sit by the window. If you're ever in town. That was it. No plea. No promises. Just a door left ajar. I read it 3 times. Then I went inside, put the kettle on, and started packing. I arrived in Eugene on a Tuesday. The coffee shop looked the same, wide windows, soft chairs, the faint smell of cinnamon and old stories. It was raining lightly, the kind of soft Oregon drizzle that doesn't demand an umbrella but still finds its way into your bones. I was early. I always was. I ordered tea. Sat by the window. Watched the street. At 9:58, the door opened. He walked in, rain on his shoulders, a small paper bag in hand. He spotted me instantly. Didn't hesitate. Just walked over and sat down. No smile. But no frown either. Something in between. He placed the bag on the table and said, "Lemon bread." I laughed. It came out too loud. He didn't flinch. "I figured," he said, "if we're going to do this, we might as well start with something familiar." I nodded. For a while, we just ate. No small talk. Just the scrape of forks and the hum of quiet music overhead. Then he looked at me and said, "I don't know what I'm supposed to feel." "I don't either," I replied. He nodded. "Okay." We didn't talk about the missing years. Not yet. We didn't talk about Nina. Or birds. Or wooden carvings. We just sat. 2 men. A table. A window. Sometimes, that's enough. At one point, he said, "I teach on Tuesdays. I've got class in an hour." I smiled. "You still walk fast." That got a real grin out of him. "I do." He stood. Picked up the bag. Looked down at me. "I'm here," he said. "That's something, right?" "It's everything," I said. He walked out, just like that. And I sat by the window a little longer, watching the rain slide down the glass. Outside, a Stellar's jay landed on the railing. Black and blue. Watching me. Alive.